Hello and welcome to another episode of Enlighten Up with Dib and Deb. And today we thought we would talk a little bit about the inner energies, the masculine and the feminine, and balancing those. I was just writing about it. I was writing about the outcome of a face split analysis that I had, and basically the two left sides put together, two right sides put together, and looking at what's the masculine energy look like and what does the feminine energy look like. And to see it in visual form like that really revealed this imbalance that's there. And ideally, when they're working as a team, there's a nice balance between the left side and the right side. And when they're not working as effectively as a team, or there's one that's more dominant than the other, then that shows up. And so Deb and I often say there is only inner work. And so me seeing this visual depiction of the masculine and feminine really brought awareness to some of the patterns that I've been seeing at play in my relationships in the external world, right? So just this awareness around how the masculine energy, the human, had been submissive to the feminine energy, the being, rather than both of them being equals and supporting one another. One was in a dominant role and the other is in a submissive role, and that shows up in the face, and then that will show up externally with me attracting males that need a lot of direction and guidance and don't really take initiative and that sort of thing. So that's I wonder what comes to your mind as I share that.
So what you're saying is that there is the physical way that you are in the world, let's call it your human interface with the world, is masculine, and the energy of the being inside, I might call that spirit or indwelling being, has a feminine energy. Perhaps they balance each other like that, but what you're saying is it's better for the human to have balance of masculine and feminine energy here in the human interface, our way of being in the world, as well as that inner being also being in balance with the masculine, rather than going, well, I'll handle the feminine, you handle the masculine, because then the balance that's going to happen in the world is that you'll attract something to balance that out. So you might say a more kind of passive or subservient male. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, well, it's if there's an underdeveloped aspect of self, that'll show up externally. So recognizing if there's any, so often people look to change the external world thing. I don't like the men that are showing up in the world, and then there's a kind of pointing the fingers out there. And so the looking inside, like, okay, so I'm noticing I attract a male that tends to be more insecure, but mask that insecurity with confidence. And they
confidence or bravado
or arrogance even, and tends to be quite lazy, and kind of doesn't really like putting the effort in and needs a lot of direction. So
leans on you.
Leans on the feminine. So recognizing the micro will mirror the macro. So if that's what I'm seeing on the macro, what's going on the micro level in terms of the internal energies of the masculine and the feminine, and that shows up in the face. That's why I had a face split analysis done, so I could see what does it look like, to see the masculine energy and the feminine energy like visually depicted in this way. And it was interesting, to say the least, right? And as you were saying, when we can have like one solid in one domain and then the other solid in the other, but when they're related and supporting one another, that's when we actually really have teamwork and the best kind of effectiveness.
So is there a problem that it's sounding like there's an implied problem in that you're not wanting to attract that kind of partner, that you want something different, or is there a problem in this?
We're just noticing the pattern. Like when I was noticing, okay, if that's the pattern of what I have been attracting, it was curiosity around, this is interesting because there's plenty of other competent, capable males, and even, but what I'm attracted to is not that. So that was revealing in and of itself. Like I noticed that the vulnerability, underneath the vulnerability of loving as intensely as I do, was this fear around like that created fear, and the attempt to soothe that fear with a bit of a power play to be in control. So the deliberate, it was unconscious, the unconscious attraction to people that couldn't meet me as an equal, couldn't possibly meet me as an equal. Why? Because then the feminine has more power. Then I'd be the one I would be the one in control and in power if they can't really meet me as an equal. And noticing, why am I attracted to that? Well, what does that reveal? Like always asking the question, what's that say about me? Asking like, what's that showing me? If that's what I'm drawn to externally, the unreliable man, what's that revealing? What does that say about?
So if you, as we always say, this is only inner work.
Yeah.
And the magic about that is when you make an adjustment internally, you notice a pattern externally and you look for it or reveal something about you internally and you make some adjustment there, then what happens?
Magic happens. It seems like magic happens in the external world, but of course we're attracted to what's a vibrational match. So when we shift it inside, then it shifts outside, always. It's just a matter of time before it shows up externally.
It can be a match so that they are the same, or it can be complementary. So if you're out of balance in yourself, you're going to attract something. It can be that you attract that same imbalance and then you can have a certain kind of conflict because they don't sit together. Or you may have to find the counterbalance to it in the external world. If you're wanting to be... Yes?
Yeah, go on.
If you're wanting to be met as an equal is what I'm hearing, then there needs to be the system in balance in itself internally to get an equal match of someone who is in balance in themselves.
Yeah, and I thought that was, but as I pay more attention to the subtle layers, I'm like, no, I can see how the human does not work as effectively as the being does. The being does work is more effective, and so I guess it reminds me of just because someone's more effective, if they keep doing it, then they'll continue to be more effective, and then the other parts don't get to develop.
Okay, so if you think of the human as the middle layer you've got the external world, and then you have the inner world, or you said the being, right? If the if if the way you're operating in the world is out of balance in terms of the feminine and masculine energy, so this is masculine, and you're inviting the counterbalance of feminine, and you find that the human is masculine, and on the other side the spirit is feminine. We've said if you make the shift internally to get inside yourself the wholeness of masculine and feminine in balance, then something in the world's going to show up to match that. What about on the other side of the equation, when the human is
overdeveloped and the being is under? Yeah, so it's the same imbalance. It's just it shows up in the opposite form. So this is what we were.
So I'm pointing to that because you just said, oh, the being, it is operating very well, and the human is out of balance. But I would suggest to you, when you make this shift,
one's taking over responsibility, one's taking under responsibility. That's what I meant.
But this is not functioning well for the being either.
Yeah. Good, nice noticing.
This is not good work. This is to create a continued function in the organism, in the consciousness. This is the spirit, the being is forced to be out of balance to create this complementary way of being. So when now you are committed to putting your attention onto making adjustment here to be whole, in balance in yourself, the feminine and masculine energy, there will be also a shift in how the being can operate through you.
Yeah, absolutely. The flow-on effects are, instead of the human asking for directions from the being for every little thing, just taking initiative and doing things, and the being can support, and so more kind of each being able, like the human encouraged to do more and the being encouraged to kind of let go a little bit more.
But also think in terms of the disconnect in the partnership between human and being will be reflective of the disconnect, or the same kind of structure that's in the material world. I am the one who takes control and lead and has to be strong in masculine energy, and the male becomes subservient to that and passive and demotivated and leaning on me. How is this the same here between spirit and human?
Yeah, same structure, exact same structure, and that's the exact same structure is what I'm seeing. You seeing something different?
So on one hand, I hear you say, I as a human am kind of more passive and seeking to be guided by spirit.
When you were saying I thought you were referencing the being, because you went to hear it, you put your hand on your heart. So that to me, I thought you meant like I the being. You meant I the human?
I would suggest, and you'll have to test it out in your own experience, and you might like to share with us, when the masculine and feminine energies are balanced in you as the human and your way of operating.
So
I would suggest that the being actually becomes more able to be strong in its guidance in the partnership, right? Because if the human is strong, it forces the other to be passive, not work.
You're in a different, you're in a different chunk size though. So I'm looking at the organization, the entity as a whole of the let's call it Divya, the organization of Divya, the being, and the human that's there, and their dynamics with one another. And so I'm noticing in that organization that human isn't operating as effective, like isn't doing in terms of each taking responsibility. One's taking less, the other's taking more, both out of balance. In that way, that dynamic is not I'll look after my bit, you look after yours, we support each other, interdependence. It's not that. It's a kind of codependent structure that's there in the human and the being, right? So it sounds like what you're saying is in the human itself, there's masculine and feminine. Yes, absolutely. Like in the human itself, there's masculine and like there's both of those energies in the human itself. Are you suggesting that in order to balance the dynamic between the human and the being, go to that layer of the energies just in the human, the masculine and feminine in the human, and stay in the like?
No, I'm saying the opposite of that.
Okay. Because it sounded like you were at another micro layer than I was just then.
So the principle is as within, so without. So you're talking about how the interplay between you yourself as Divya and other humans in the world, right? How that is playing out, it will be playing out inside as well, between Divya the human and the indwelling being. Because the human, you've already identified this, the feminine and masculine within you, the human, is not in balance. It will force that the indwelling being is also out of balance. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying, you know, what's going on between you, the human, and your entire internal psyche or the spirit being. People use lots of different words. That's why I'm kind of giving a menu option of them, right?
Soul and psyche, human and being. Yeah.
Just as you can see, this doesn't allow a real partnership that creates a codependency. This is the same here. And so when you come into balance, it won't be like, well, this is my role and that's your role. It will be like, I have this full role, you have that full role, and we can really partner together, not one taking a meal past part of the role of partnership.
Yeah. So it's exciting to discover that, because you know, of course, some people, you know, when they discover something new that they might call a problem, they're like, and I, of course, am looking at the opportunity that's there that awaits on the other side of having uncovered this.
Totally, you know, I'm totally with you. I get excited when I'm like, oh, tell me how I'm getting it wrong. If I can find what is the you know, problem, let's call it, or the failing, or the getting it wrong. Oh my God, I'm so excited because now you know exactly where to put your attention to make the adjustment. And this is really how all of these things serve us, including emotions.
Yeah, exactly. That's why you and I both get excited when we find charges. You know? Ooh, another trigger. Something to clean up. Which, you know, it's an important thing for us to recognize. Is it's the discovery of that, then only can we get on to being more aligned and congruent. Like the magic that awaits on the other side comes through that that awareness first. So
there is a natural psychological phenomenon when we meet some problem, challenge or barrier, or something that's not going exactly how we want. The first thing the psyche will do is resist it, feel like it's a problem.
Yeah. That's not me. Denial, that stage. Yeah.
So whether it's a split second of like, oh, I don't want to have a problem to deal with, whether it's a split second or it can be a much longer period of time, what's important is to recognize that moment of resistance, and then it transforms when we go towards it, which is what you're doing. Like, oh, okay, kind of bring it on. Let me put attention onto this. So if we don't notice that moment of resistance, Oh, let me say these problems. I'm generalising to something beyond this because I know it's a big problem for people that when things aren't how they would want them to be, it triggers fear or doubt in us.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what we can do is shrink away from that. And I love the metaphor in the story that Jordan Peterson shared in something I was watching. The children's story of there's no such thing as dragons.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a children's story that illustrates this little boy met this little dragon that turned up in his bedroom, and he just patted it on the head and it stayed quite sweet. And then he told his mother, and his mother said there's no such thing as dragons. And the more they tried to avoid it and not engage or deal with it, the bigger that it got until it carted off the whole house and everything was in chaos until they had to admit, this is here.
Yeah.
And as soon as they did, the dragon started to shrink down and turn back into quite a sweet little pet. And, you know, I hope that it's self-evident, the metaphor of the story that is in this, the moral of the story. So it is with us too. When we meet it, it's just this actually quite delightful little kind of character in our life that is quite easy to be with. And this is what you're modeling for us. When we're like, oh no, that can't be so. No, I'm already got all of me sorted. The thing just grows bigger and bigger and quite monstrous. So.
Yeah. Well, the metaphor that you brought to my awareness, I might need to do some cleaning up around the metaphor I have between the human and the being as well, because the current metaphor is the being as the executive director and the human as the executive assistant. And I had chosen that metaphor with the idea that, well, a leader doesn't really see any role as more valuable than any other role because all the roles have a valuable function. Even the cleaner has a valuable function for the organization. And yet, energetically, there was some superiority there, which, you know, was particularly on the part of the EA, like executive assistant, being like, oh, I'm just an executive assistant. You're the director, you know. So even if it wasn't coming from that imbalance in terms of energetically looking up to, it's still a co-creation, right? It was so, yeah. So I'm curious to see how that metaphor will evolve, because, you know, they're dynamic and changing, and I wonder what it's going to turn into and become. I wonder, do you have a metaphor for your human and being and how they work together?
I have more of a metaphor for, not consciously, so I will put my attention onto that. But what I do have a metaphor for is as a woman, how to have in balance the masculine and feminine energies, and how to have that imbalance between a woman and a man. And the metaphor that I hold is a woman, when she's in balance between her masculine and feminine energy, the core is very strong.
Yeah.
And in some ways, immovable is not the word, but it's like a solid hole that runs through the center that is strong and grounding, and then around that is a softness and a yielding, and the man in balance will tend to have a very mushy, marshmallowy kind of inner, and the harder or masculine or control is external or on the outside surrounding that. And so there's a balance there and a balance here. And when those come together with the external softness and the hardness, there's a safety for, the woman is in balance. Because she has her own strength. She doesn't need to feel any vulnerability in the softness that's there. And the man also is allowed to, let's say, the softness on the inside kind of melts out through the external strength. Does that make sense? So they're kind of visual metaphors that have helped me in my own balance of masculine and feminine energy, and reminds me to allow softness in my way of engaging, because you would know that my natural energy is quite masculine. That could have come about because in growing up there weren't those to care for me as a child, and I needed to kind of feel like I was tough and strong to look after myself. And yet when I don't bring that hardness or strength outside, but I let it to be guiding internally, and I allow my softness to be with others. For me, that helps me to have that imbalance. Got any thoughts on that?
Well, that doesn't really, like, what I'm more looking, I'll see what comes in terms of like two having full roles and how those full roles work together is the bit that I'm I thought that was there in the metaphor, because any good executive director knows you need a good executive assistant, and that hierarchy isn't working anymore, so there's so there's an opportunity for creating another, and could be just different board directors, the different seats on a board panel with different expertise. Could be that. What I'm looking for is a metaphor that they each have their roles and they support one another in the overall goal. And so I think maybe board directors could work for that. Because then they sit around the same table and they have the same, rank, if you will. So there's no kind of idea of you report to me. And that, see how powerful our metaphors are? Like that metaphor would have created some level of looking up to and reporting to, which isn't, which would have created that imbalance as well, right? Like it would have perpetuated that imbalance. So,
what in terms of my metaphor, something doesn't sit right with me about the languaging of it, because it could sound like I'm saying people in female bodies, sex, that they should be soft and feminine, and people in male bodies that they should have this balance of masculine, feminine energy. And I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that there is for me, there was a natural masculine energy. And so to
use the word natural just now, but then earlier you said, this might have come about because I grew up needing to take care of myself. True. I was on a podcast yesterday when I was asked the question, what are your views on the role of nature versus nurture? So that my ear just picked up at the, I have this natural masculine way. And then
I suppose I'm saying that because I want to flag that I don't want to be definitive about, this is who I am. but appreciate that however I'm showing up in the world right now, that there could be factors that mean that it's there's a place for adjustment. And at the same time, I experience what seems natural to me is it seems more automatic, more natural, to be strong. It seems to me that characteristic has been there since the beginning. Nevertheless, if there's an occasion for me to be very strong externally, then I can balance that by making sure that there's softness there internally, that it's fueled by softness. What I do know is if there's a feeling of hard inside and strength and control externally, there's not balance. If there's hard on the outside, there needs to be the balance of the soft on the inside. If there's hard on the inside, there needs to be the balance of the soft on the outside. And this is not fixed to a female body or a male body, but still they are, let's say, that's the woman balance is soft outside and masculine or the hard inside, and vice versa. But I don't know if woman and man is the right word for that.
Yeah, woman and man, and the gender roles, woman and man. And really what you're pointing to is the fluidity. That's important. And that's what's lost in a codependent structure, because it's the idea of you have this job and I have this job and this is my role and that's your role, rather than full ownership and fluidity as well. So yeah, there's interdependence or intimate communion.
And the goal is to be whole within the organism itself, rather than it has to be supplemented, because that does make the codependency and, in a way, vulnerability and imbalance and so forth. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah. Hope that was useful. You got something out of that. If you have any questions, leave us a comment. If there's anything else you'd like us to explore, let us know. Happy to be of service, and we'll see you back for another episode of enLIGHTen tomorrow. Bye for now.